Hello, welcome to another weekly video. Today I'm going to be talking about what the difference is between God and Jesus. Apparently, there's been a lot of confusion between some of that, sometimes in churches, maybe sometimes amongst other people when they're talking about Jesus and God. And I mean, there is an extreme difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I just want to talk about some of those things a little bit. Um, when I've been learning, and I guess I'm still learning, I think I've seen a lot of confusion just for myself between the Old Testament and New Testament. Um, they're extremely different, but really God is kind of the main spotlight in the Old Testament, and Jesus is more the spotlight in the New Testament. And so I guess I'll try to start with some basics like um, God is is the is the main spirit, if you want to say. He is the one that created the earth and the universe and everything like that. Like I said, the Old Testament is mostly focused on him. Um, in the New Testament, it talks about Jesus. So Jesus is God's son, and that means that Jesus was born as a human on earth, um, and he has all the same like spirit and ideas as God, but it's not the same as God because it's God's son. Now, um, towards the end of the New Testament, it talks about Jesus went and became a spirit and went back up to um, heaven. So Jesus is a spirit alongside God in heaven. Um, they're still two different things. Now, I guess I could throw the Holy Spirit into it a little bit. I guess some people have some confusion about that too. The Holy Spirit is considered like a separate spirit as well, but it still has all the same um, ideas and thoughts and guidelines as God and Jesus. I always felt like the Holy Spirit was more um, closer to Jesus and the things that he taught. Not that God doesn't believe the same things Jesus does. I'm not saying that. It's just um, I always tend to focus more on Jesus when I look at the teachings and the things from the Bible. To be honest, I have to really throw out a lot of the Old Testament. It's very confusing and conflicting with the New Testament. To me, it feels conflicting between Jesus and God. It's confusing, so I really don't go by the Old Testament. To me, it's just kind of a small reference point. I mean, I think the Ten Commandments is a good foundation to kind of build on. Um, but a lot of the things that happen in the Old Testament don't make sense, and I know a lot of people talk about how there's um, there's probably more to some of the stories that than what's in the Bible. If you look at them without any context, which I guess the Bible is a lot of out of context things, but if you look at the stories that the Old Testament tells, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't feel like it includes everything that happened. In a lot of ways, it just feels like there's no grace from God, and people are just killed for something small, and lots of people are given disease and all this crazy stuff. Um, but I feel like sometimes it's just certain things are left out, so it makes God look bad. But without knowing what those things are and without having any context. I just kind of don't go by the Old Testament. Unfortunately, I've known a lot of people that really seem to only go by the Old Testament specifically. Um, I don't know if that's a trauma thing. I don't know exactly why, but I remember my mother specifically was very much like, um, well, I won't just say my mother. Many churches I went to were very much like, um, I guess, God will strike you down. Just all about God's punishment, and there was no grace from God. It felt like I just remember getting kind of confused by all that, and um, sometimes feeling bad myself about things that I had done because there's just so many people kind of believing in that. I remember I was going to church a couple years ago, and I had another member say that she felt like it was wrong to do things on a Sunday because the Bible kind of talks about how you need to rest on the Sabbath. I think that was an Old Testament thing, but that's just not really the way things are now. Things have changed, and if you go by the grace that came along in the New Testament, it's not really that black and white anymore. But a lot of people still believe that, and they still go by that. I'm assuming it's just a lot of confusion. I mean, maybe there's like a set of rules in the Old Testament that kind of change in the New Testament. That people can't quite seem to understand the change. Which, I mean, I've even seen that in the Bible. I think Jesus talked about how I guess the Pharisees were the ones still believing in the Old Testament ways, and he was trying to get them to see a little bit outside of that, and um, people just really struggled with it. And I see that same thing today, So it's a lot of religious people. Um, some people call it being legalistic. Um, it sometimes feels like it helps people feel better, but I can't speak to it because um, I don't really quite think that way. I think I've struggled with some things, but um, I I think it's more extreme for a lot of people than what I've experienced. So I mean, um, like I said, I really tend to go more with what Jesus said and his teachings in the New Testament. Um, I feel like that's more where things are today anyway. I've seen in my own life that Jesus has a lot of grace. I mean, I still kind of consider them at least this on the same page as far as um, like God is still the number one person being in control. So I say, I still think God has a lot of grace for us. You know, if you want to look at it like God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, they all operate under a lot of grace. So I look at it that way. I think I tend to look at God as like um, God and Jesus are closer to the same as far as like the New Testament, because like I said, I think there's a whole lot of things that aren't explained in the Old Testament, and God actually has more grace than it seems like. I don't think that we're supposed to think that God and Jesus are opposing each other. God's not ready to just kill somebody for stealing um, some food or something, and Jesus is not. I feel like they're all on the same page. They all operate the same way, but like it's just it can be confusing when you try to go by the Bible. I think that's why I stress so much that it's hard to go by the Bible in a lot of ways. I see a lot of truth in it, but at the same time, I see how it's so confusing. And I think that really our own personal relationship is supposed to kind of help us interpret the Bible in some ways too. So, your own experience can help you really understand all these things. But I try to just look at God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit all as like they all are on the same page, even though they're not the same um, beings, spirits, if you want to call them that. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I hope that clears some things up. But anyway, thank you for watching. Have a nice day.